Good afternoon. Whoa. Jeremy, I got all your volume. Good afternoon. My name is Terry Walson. I'm the founder and CTO of Perspecsys. I guess a number of years ago, I saw the need to start protecting data from an enterprise perspective if there was going to be any sort of reasonable cloud adoption, especially public cloud adoption. And over the years, we developed what has become, and fortunately you all have the handout on the seat, so I'm not going to belabor the point, what we term the privacy, residency, and security solution for cloud data from an enterprise perspective. That's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is, as Jeremy mentioned, war in the clouds, are you ready? When I realized I was going to be speaking to such a large audience, I figured I better put up a topic that is both timely and provocative. And certainly the fates have been good to me because I think we've all heard in the last 6 months some pretty amazing data breaches from an enterprise perspective. And so we're going to review some of those today. And I'm going to put it into basically a war context. So for those of you that have any sort of military background, you can basically start, and hopefully some of you will recognize some of what I put in here. In fact, at one point I actually quote von Clausewitz on war, required reading at most military academies. So let's get started. Fine print, all of you read that? Good. So, as I said, we've been doing this for some time. This is my first time at Cloud Expo. And we presented at the GovIT Expo. In fact, the last time I spoke to the general audience, I also was speaking just after Jill Singer. So it's interesting that history is repeating itself. So the music that we were just starting off with, I love the quote, so I put it up here from Fall Out Boy. I'm an arms dealer fitting you with weapons in the form of words or code, or whatever the case may be, HTML forms. This ain't as seen, though. It's a arms race. A lot of people don't seem to appreciate that we are in the middle of a war. And I'm going to talk about the theater of operations in a moment. But the reality is, we are already experiencing the casualties of war. I'm going to describe to you the theater of operations. In fact, it's all around us. I'm going to discuss the arms race, and have no doubt, you will recognize the progression. For those of you that have been doing computing for any reasonable period of time, you're going to notice the progression in this escalation of arms that we're seeing. I'm going to offer you some offensive and defensive tactics, and then we're going to discuss what's next. Now, I've got 30 minutes, folks. This ain't going to be deep. It's going to be broad. So if you want to have a deeper discussion, we are in booth 114. I am happy to discuss this further with you. So I'm going to give you the forest view in, now I guess 23 and a half minutes, and then some time for questions. So start off with the casualties of war. Who remembers 3 years ago? TJ Maxx. Oh, come on. Yeah, raise some hands. All right. Who remembers just 6 months ago? Epsilon, or less. How many of you received the letters from your banks, from your insurance companies, from your service providers that said, I'm sorry to tell you, some of your information may have been disclosed. Increase your spam filters, because at the very least, you're going to be getting a lot of mail. That was Epsilon. And that was a great example of what I would consider to be one of the more, most recent, but more prevalent and successful cloud attacks, because Epsilon was a service provider to other enterprises. It was those other enterprises that then had their customer data compromised, or a lot of you who raised your hand sitting here today. This is something that is not a one-time wonder. We're seeing attacks on Sony. We're seeing attacks on Honda. What's interesting, and again, we'll see the topic in terms of the arms race, and let's talk about some of these new and emerging weapons of mass data destruction, is the fact that now we're seeing strategic attacks, multi-pronged attacks, phased attacks. Here we thought that the RSA attack back in March, where they basically compromised the two-factor authentication strategy of RSA, was bad enough. Any of you actually got the notes and read the open letter from RSA saying, yes, we've had a data breach. You might be compromised if you're a customer. Well, it turns out Lockheed Martin as a customer was compromised. It was like stealing someone's keys, minting the key to the front door, sticking it back in their pocket, and then walking in through the front door whenever they pleased. And that's the two-phased strategic attack that was perpetrated against Lockheed Martin by virtue of first hitting RSA to get the keys to the front door. That's pretty darn sophisticated. We're going to talk about Stuxnet. Anyone heard about Stuxnet? Yeah, good for you. Hope you're studying it. Because again, that is the first cyber cruise missile. And that as a pattern is going to be repeated over and over and over again. Have no doubt. So, What are the theater of operations? As I said, it's all around us. I was shocked as I was preparing for this presentation just before I left Toronto. I was in my travel agency. This is a picture from the travel agency. Can you read what it says there? RFID blocking billfold, RFID blocking passport folder, RFID blocking credit card holder. Oh my goodness. That means as I'm walking in amongst you, some of you could basically just be walking by reading my RFID. Now, why is that important? Think about it. I just talked about the RSI attack. Now, if I am, for example, I've been targeted by one of these bad guys, the hackers, as a system administrator in one of my target enterprises, they know I have perhaps an RFID badge that gets me in the front door. They walk by me, they can now mint my badge. Oh my goodness. Never mind stealing identity theft and writing checks in my name, which are going to bounce anyway because I'm not that rich. The reality, that's the one joke, by the way, of the afternoon. We're done. So, actually, I have one more. I have a cartoon for you. But the point being that RFID and blue snarfing isn't just for identity theft anymore. It's for these kinds of strategic multi-pronged attacks, multi-phased attacks. We all know about war driving and Wi-Fi basically hacking in, and the insider threats and the hobby hacking. The script kiddies, though, aren't doing a lot of damage. Now it's some pretty sophisticated folks all the way down to the nation-state cyber commands that are now initiating and testing cyber warfare right in your backyard. Now imagine, let's go back a couple hundred years. You're a farmer. Next thing you know, you hear the cannons coming over the corner. Are you going to keep farming in your farm field as the cannons are coming over the hill? I don't think so. You're going to be taking cover. Unfortunately, we're all farming on the internet while this war is occurring all around us. Are we taking the precautions that are necessary? Oops. So as I said, there's the arms race. What are we talking about in terms of phishing? Have any of you succumbed to phishing? Some of the largest cloud vendors have succumbed to phishing. Administrative credentials were phished from some of the largest cloud vendors that you may be trusting your data and applications to. Oops. So what precautions are you taking? What precautions are they taking? Phishing is basically just, as the name implies, you're phishing for information. That could be through email, it could be through a website, whatever the case may be. We're seeing certainly new advances in Wi-Fi. That was how TJ Maxx was compromised, for example. There's scripts out there that allow me to break web, for goodness sakes. This is why everyone says, oh, go to WPA. But even there's a lot of hacking and cracking going on. And it's amazing how much of this is public domain that you can just go and Google for. One of the scarier vectors is right here, and then its big brother, the pad. A lot of these are being introduced into the enterprise. And what's stunning is that people seem to forget that there's more power in my hand right now than what it took to land the man on the moon. And yet we're walking in and connecting these things up to our internets, into our intranets, in a trusted fashion, or semi-trusted fashion. Or worse yet, we're allowing these things to connect to the internet externally as well as my internet, and they can become gateways or bridges between the two. So mobile as a next vector is huge. How many people are deploying pads and iPads out to their Salesforce or services or, wow, a lot less than I anticipated. Not a Salesforce automation crowd. The reality, though, is I'm sure your sales folks are if you're in that line of business, are begging for that. They don't want to carry notebooks anymore. They don't want to be tethered to a desk. There's service personnel as well. I'm just carrying a pad wirelessly. Let's go and do some work. There's certainly infrastructure, service, and application exploits. I'm sure some of you have actually read the white papers on how I can hop from an infrastructure as a service perspective from one virtual machine to another. They're not as contained as you think. There is possibilities. If I've got two virtual machines on the same hypervisor, is there a possibility based on the hypervisor for me to be able to crack out of mine and crack into another one on the same hypervisor? Yeah, there is. There's a lot of scary stuff out there. And the standards and the research is just starting to catch up to the very well-funded bad guys. So I've got insider threats. This is where a lot of security tends to fall down. And again, I've got a cartoon that talks about this in a moment. But the insider threats is something that needs to be taken very, very, very seriously, where we not only need to compartmentalize our data and our systems, we need to start compartmentalizing our people. Separation of concerns, separation of operations, separations of roles and duties. As I said earlier, we're seeing blended attacks more and more. For those of you that raised your hand, I was very pleased to see how many of you had actually heard of Stuxnet. For those of you that hadn't, let's just review it. Normally, a 0-day exploit, one is worth its weight in gold, so you'll use one to create a Trojan horse or a virus of some sort. Stuxnet used no less than 4. It was unprecedented. They figured there was 2 coding teams based on the style of code and the code used. Its propagation vector, its new weapon of mass destruction, was a thumb drive. It was stunning the way this thing was crafted to be delivered, and more importantly, targeting a very specific installation for uranium enrichment in this case. Who's to say that the next targeted location or coordinates isn't a cloud vendor or service provider? So blended attacks, the Stuxnet cruise missile as an architectural pattern for these things is real and proven. And as I said, we've already seen the RSA to Lockheed strategic campaigns out there. It's getting actually more and more ugly, depending on the sensitivity of the information, the value of the information, or the resources that the bad guys are after. This is the kind of things that we're all now facing. If you're responsible for security in your environment, I got to tell you, you've got a lot to think about and a lot more to think about going forward. And there's a lot of great books on hacking out there that after, I guess, the second book, I crawled into a fetal position, unplugged the internet, and told my kids, you're never buying anything online again. Went out to Walmart and bought all of the, the Visa cards for $15 and the iTunes cards because there's no way my credit card's going online ever again. There's a lot of scary information out there, and it's worth reading. This I found really interesting. How many of you are familiar with the fact that 18 minutes worth of basically highly sensitive information traffic, internet traffic, was actually routed through Chinese servers a while back? Just a handful, eh? It's amazing. Basically, through one standard protocol on the internet, we were able to tell all of the routers on the internet, please route all of this traffic. Instead of 4,000 networks, let's route 37,000 networks worth of traffic through these Chinese servers. Now, the articles that are coming out subsequent to that, as you can see here, are claiming, well, the Chinese hijacked 15% of the web are overhyped. I think they missed the point. The point was what we just saw was the first Bikini Atoll. What we just saw was a weapons of mass destruction, basically test attack. Let's see if we could do this. And they proved they could. And we're going to see more of these tests. It's pretty scary stuff. Now, think about that. Can your traffic sustain scrutiny over the internet? When I talk about deploying and securing internet traffic, I'm not talking about the cloud provider themselves. I mean, a lot of the commercial public cloud providers ostensibly have the most secure data centers on the planet. But what about from the fingertips of your users all the way to their firewall? A lot of this traffic, does it really need to be analyzed in real time? No. Now these people can record this traffic, play it back. They can record this traffic, analyze it. Is it encrypted? Isn't it encrypted? What did you use for the encryption? It's all there. Can your data over the internet to the cloud and from the cloud sustain scrutiny? So what are some of the offensive and defensive tactics? Well, certainly from a public cloud perspective, we're seeing attacks now from an infrastructure, a platform, and a software as a service perspective. They've all had either research done or actually been penetrated, and information and resources compromised. So if it's the public cloud, what about the private cloud? Well, again, we're back to Stuxnet. If your private cloud infrastructure is well understood and architected, can the information about it be compromised such that a Stuxnet-like cruise missile be crafted to target you? The answer is yes. And what's scarier is a lot of people will talk about open source. And I'm a big open source proponent. Believe me, we do a lot of our stuff in open source. But that's a double-edged sword because now the bad guys have your source code as well. So if there is a compromise to be had, it's easier for them to find it. It's that same old song and dance, that old shoe about open source versus closed source. I'm waffling. I'm on either side of the fence. I'm happy to debate with anyone back at booth 114. But the reality is the information is out there. From a private cloud perspective, as I said, the infrastructure is something you need to worry about. The insider threats. Again, I'll talk about that in a moment. But suffice to say that every one of your users, every one of your administrators is a potential vector. Do you trust everybody? I know for me to coach Little League or to coach soccer, I actually have to have a police report, basically a background check, in order for me to go and coach Little League or coach soccer. How many of you have actually had a police check for your last job application? Not very many. Isn't that funny? We're more interested in protecting our kids than our data. Probably a good thing, depending on your perspective, but it's interesting to note. How expensive is your data loss? And yet we're not even bringing up the same level of checking for insider threat that way, checking our people. Targeted attacks and multi-pronged strategic attacks. I think, as we've already seen, these things are real. They're already happening around us. You have to question, how important a target are you? How important a target is your information and or your resources? You need to classify and categorize that. So I look at it defensively now. What are some of the things you can do? Well, certainly I can assist you, and this is something that we do as part of our implementations, is a data sensitivity classification. We actually came up with a taxonomy for helping you classify the sensitivity of your data, and then segregate it and segment it. It can be used together, but the management of that data can actually be segregated, and that's something that our PR server, for example, actually does. There's a separation of concerns. We're actually working with a bank right now here in New York that's deploying our solution worldwide. And one of the things that impressed me was that the administrators for the solution, nobody has the complete picture. No one has the keys to the kingdom. The platform administrator has no mechanism for getting to the database. The database administrator has no mechanism for getting to the application. The application administrator can't see all the data, if any of it, depending on their geolocation. They've separated the concerns even from an administrative perspective. No one individual can be compromised in order to compromise the entire system. And that's modus operandi for these folks. So you have to ask yourself as well, Joe in IT, who is both the person you call to help you with configuring your new PC onto the network, as well as setting up the database, as well as administering your SFA, your Salesforce automation application. How trustworthy is Joe again? But even furthermore, even if he is trustworthy, because Joe's you, the question becomes, what happens if you decide to move on? What happens if you get hit by a bus? The access control, W5, I'm Canadian, and W5 is actually a television program. It's one of these news programs. It's old as I am. And it stands for who, what, where, when, and why. And those are the 5 questions you should be asking yourself of every cloud deployment. Who's accessing this? What are they accessing? Where are they accessing it from, and where's the data? When are they accessing it, and why are they accessing it? Separation of concerns. And I love this quote, and we've seen it time and again in a lot of great films, right? When Indiana Jones turns to the guy and he says, Dr. Jones, trust nobody. That's exactly the case here. Separate out your concerns. Trust nobody. I love talking encryption. Even though we support encryption, there's some real hard and fast realities here. We steal a notebook. Oh, but it's got 4096 RSA encryption. Blast, our evil plan is foiled. That's what we believe to be the case. So it's going to take you a gazillion craze, 5 bazillion years to actually crack the encryption. Or a $5 wrench to beat the guy senseless to get the password out of him, right? Or getting back, if you want to spend a little more money, $500 to bribe him to keep giving you those passwords. That's a reality. There are actually cases of that documented. So how much are you paying those admins? And for those admins in the room, there's a great topic of conversation at your next pay raise discussion, isn't it? I don't think you're paying me enough, Bob. Oh. So I'm not going to belabor the point. You actually have our trifold brochure. The point is that the solution we came up with, it's not actually called the Data Fortress. I renamed it just for this presentation. But it is the Privacy Residency Security Server. We basically give you back the power with the PRS server to control your sensitive data, even if you're using the public cloud. And that's all I'll say. That's the teaser. That's the hook. Come see me in booth 114. So what's next? Well, certainly from a social networking perspective. How many of you on Facebook? Oh, come on. All right, that's better. How many of you have seen all those phishing scams on Facebook? Oh, look, some ride went off the rails in Disney World, Oh, click, click, click. Oh, no, I've just been infected. Social networking, however, if you jump to the bottom there, is actually becoming the way people want to do work. It's the way they want to do business. What we're seeing is a paradigm shift in work, in application development, deployment, and management. Social networking is fast becoming, and for those of you that saw the Dell keynote, did you notice that chatter slide that he had with Salesforce? That's what people are interested in. And the whole next generation coming up behind us, this is the way they want to work and live. We're going to see a seamless integration of their working lives and their personal lives. What is work and what is home life? It's going to become inextricably intertwined. Part of that is because of the perfect storm of cloud, social networking, and the mobile platforms for the delivery of those applications anywhere, anytime. It's, on the one hand, that utopia. It's, on the other hand, it's that nightmare. Personally, I vacation on a tropical island that doesn't have any cell service. My wife warns me that I might as well not bother bringing any equipment with me unless it is not allergic to seawater. And she makes that very clear. And it's because she wants me to keep my personal life segregated from my work life. But the reality is, how many of you, while listening to me, got bored and went and checked your BlackBerry or your iPhone? Come on, admit it. There were a couple. Okay. I don't want to see you, or I do want to talk to you afterwards. So, borderless networking as well. These people, like I said, are bringing in these mobile platforms and these applications right into your corporate infrastructure. They're connecting at home. Have you actually personally ensured that the wireless router in their homes are using WPA and TKIP? No. And yet that same mobile platform has now been brought into your environment and is probably hitting your wireless environment. Oops. So we're seeing this cross-pollination as a vector. Remember the thumb drives of mass destruction that we saw from Stuxnet. The mobile platform is, unfortunately, is going to become one of those delivery mechanisms. And also, more importantly, we're now seeing the interconnected applications, especially from a cloud perspective. All the cloud vendors are getting together. Standards are emerging. Integration is happening, and it's not happening behind your firewall anymore. It's happening out in the cloud. What else is propagating across those interconnections? That's a question you need to ask and answer. So I'm going to leave you on a positive note. As I promised you, I had a quote from von Clausewitz on war, and that is the defensive form of warfare is intrinsically stronger than the offensive. In other words, you defensively now, defending your enterprise, are in a much better position than the bad guys. The question becomes, do you even realize you're fighting a war? My name's Terry Walston. Thank you very much.